So I want to talk a little bit about the state of AEW because I have thoughts and things to say about what's going on now with AEW, and it's very nuanced and very complicated. It's not just a black or white type of situation here. It requires a lot of nuance. So I mentioned in my review for Full Gear, and I've talked about privately with friends that at this point right now, AEW feels very, very cold, meaning it's not hot. It's very cold. People, even though Dave Meltzer and Tony Khan and guys like that were celebrating the new deal they made with Warner Brothers Discovery, the company still has a lot of problems, mostly because the fact that the arena attendance is still very, very small and actually getting smaller, and the storylines are just not connecting, and the viewership's going down too. I mean, if you look at where the viewerships have been at for the past 2 or 3 years and just compare week to week, like this week last year, next week the year before, you'll notice that it's dropping. And originally the base was like 900,000, and then it went down to like 7, 6, and then now it seems to be on its way to 500,000. So why are fans checked out? What's going on here? So the issue with AEW is that, and this has not been a good year for them, is that they haven't been able to maintain momentum. People think that it's because WWE got hot again, and there is something to that. People watched AEW back in 2019 because it felt like an alternative and it felt like something different from WWE because at the time WWE was absolutely horrible. 2019, 2018 WWE was not good. They had some shining moments, don't get me wrong, but it was not good. The main program that was decent was obviously NXT at the time because you had Black and Gold Triple H. You had phenomenal stuff going on. The Adam Cole feud with Gargano, like that whole thing was just great. That was the rise of Rhea Ripley in AEW, trying to dethrone Shayna Baszler. Those were good times. Now, I think part of the reason is that WWE got hot, and so the AEW fans that were disgusted WWE fans went back to that. That's only part of the reason, though. I admire AEW for trying something new. I don't think that copying the NWO storyline, but having it be John Moxley as your Hulk Hogan and having like Pac and Claudio be like the Hall and Nash, where it's basically an invasion angle where they're coming in through the crowd and trying to change the company and dominate it. And then you've got like these baby faces that are trying to save the company. Um, like it's clearly a copy of NWO. You've got Darby Allin doing all the same things that Sting did almost back in the day, and he used to team with Sting. So it's literally like a new version of that. Now, a few issues with that is, first of all, as I said in my review, I don't think that Darby Allin, I don't see him as a world champion. I just don't. But clearly, he's going to be the one to dethrone John Moxley. The issue is that even though they are trying something new, it's not hot. It often comes off like a clown show because they do something illogical and they do something that's goofy. Now, the other problem with the company, and we've talked about this before, is that AEW's television is, for the most part, unwatchable. Collision is, I don't know anybody who watches Collision. I mean, like in my group, in my circle of wrestling friends, I probably have a couple that have friends that watch it, but people who I consistently watch wrestling with, none of them watch Collision because the show is boring. Rampage is dead. Now, when it comes to Dynamite, Dynamite's the A show, and I watch it on pretty much every week, but lately I have not been watching it. I didn't watch last week's episode, and I'm probably not going to watch the one tomorrow. And I think it's because the show is just like the storylines they have going. Obviously, I mentioned the Mox storyline. It seemed interesting, but now I don't care anymore. The show just basically feels like they're throwing together random matches with a couple of promos. There's no real flow to the show. And the thing is, I think the show this year has made so many mistakes and been so corny, and the storylines have not been storylines that are getting people into the product. And that's because some of the storylines don't make any sense. For example, earlier in the year, they did the whole thing where they showed the CM Punk footage. That was a huge mistake. Showing the CM Punk footage of All In proves that Tony Khan is a pussy for saying his life is in danger when it was a little headlock that wasn't even as scary as a freaking fifth grade lunchroom fight. It was a joke. And everything CM Punk said was true. And so a fan who's objective, who's not just an AEW diehard, is going to look at that and say, wow, Punk was right. Everything he said is true. It was nothing. It was absolutely nothing, that entire Jack Perry thing. People lost confidence in Tony Khan because Twitter fingers Tony, shit talking Tony all year. It catches up to you. It does catch up to you. And I think people were just very turned off by the things he was doing. The whole storyline where the elite, where the Bucks were EVPs and had like power, I felt it was going to turn into sort of an Attitude Era-esque story where you had a heel authority figure, or figures plural, making the babyface's life hell. And that is not what happened. In the first few weeks, there was sort of a power struggle because they explained that Tony was at home in Jacksonville and couldn't run the show, so the Bucks had to run it. However, there wasn't enough like creative, unique things about that the Bucks were doing on these shows to make it interesting. And then you had Tony come back and just take power, and it was all dropped. Tony's back. He's back being the, you know, the, I guess, storyline commissioner, even though in real life he owns the company. In storyline, he does as well. And that could also be a mistake. And so the whole thing with the Bucks just faded away. You know, you had the match at Double or Nothing, right? The arena, Anarchy in the Arena. And that was supposed to be the blow off to that, to the Young Bucks thing. And then you had, of course, the War Games match, the Blood and Guts match. But neither one of those really properly changed anything because it was back to whatever the show was after that. What I mean is that there were no consequences from either of those two matches. We just moved on. Also, the MJF Adam Cole storyline is another huge miss. And these two things really show that Tony Khan is not a good booker and never has been. I'm sorry, but he's not. I don't care what you think. He's not a good booker. These stories, like the thing with MJF and Adam Cole and MJF and Will Ospreay, having MJF come back as a babyface, lay out Cole, and then literally like 2 months, 3 months later, you reverse that and you make it so where MJF was the heel the entire time secretly and Cole was turning evil to overthrow MJF. They tried so hard to have it make sense, and it didn't make sense. It does not make any sense. It's stupid. And the way they treated MJF this year has been bad. Now, I know he's going to go do a movie. He's doing Happy Gilmore 2. I get all that. But, like, you have to understand, the Adam Cole feud with MJF derailed his career. Completely derailed it. I think Adam Cole coming back, there's still a possibility of him to get back on the horse. But for MJF, it's been totally derailed. And I don't know what they can do to fix it. He is a great talker. He is a great talent. No arguing there. But the booking behind him is failing him. It really is. Tony Khan, for a guy who is a student of wrestling, isn't really all that creative. The Mercedes Moné arrival kind of flopped, and they had to make her a heel, which is fine, but that's what happened. You've also got other sort of side stories, like, for example, this like Beast Mortos versus Commander feud or whatever, like when all they're doing is having just random matches. Like, there's no real story. There's nothing that's really captivating about the characters. We don't know much about the characters. The Bobby Lashley, Swerve Strickland stuff, I enjoyed that stuff. I actually think that's the best stuff they're doing right now in AEW. But the company feels cold. The shows feel cold because the crowds are so small that you can feel that there's nobody there. You can feel that it feels like a high school gym. And now what they're going to be doing next year is running smaller buildings, which is smart. Save on the cost of renting big buildings, buy smaller ones, rent smaller ones, and then pack them. But the fact that AEW has to do that, considering all the momentum they had in 2019, 5 years ago, considering, don't get me wrong, don't forget that they were guns a-blazing that first year. How many consecutive sellouts did AEW do? Before the pandemic, there were so many sellouts. People were in. People were curious. People were trying to try the product. They wanted to see these guys. They wanted to see something different. People were excited. The company has no continuity. They just do angles to build matches that people don't want to see. Like I mentioned the MJF thing, like the guy, has some development with the Adam Cole story a year ago, and then he just goes back to being a heel, right? And he's better as a heel, obviously, but there's like, he regressed. It wasn't like a different type of heel. He regressed. And then Adam Cole comes back as a baby face out of nowhere. Like, it's stupid, man. Like, wrestling fans, not all of them are very sharp. They're not the sharpest knives in the drawer, but people can sense, like, if something's wrong. What about Jericho? Jericho's been doing the same act now since he first dropped the title in AEW, where he surrounds himself with a group of younger guys that are going to learn from him. That's literally all Jericho has done in AEW. Think about it. They only know how to book Jericho one way. He has the inner circle, right? Then he had the Jericho Appreciation Society, and now it's the learning tree. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing with a new coat of paint, and not that new of a coat of paint. Like, it's like they don't even realize it. And also, Jericho's very TV old. Like, he's been on TV too much. He needs a break. Fans are sick of him. The Young Bucks, they're supposed to be EVPs, don't even use that power. And they used to, but they just dropped it. This is what I'm talking about. Like, it's a mess. Like, you can't get invested into AEW because when they try long-term stories, unless you have somebody there to really control where the story's going to go, like a Cody or Kenny Omega, Tony Khan drops the ball almost every time. He just does. Like, something happens, or the story doesn't have a fulfilling ending, or whatever. It never really follows its way through. And this is like what WWE used to be. And speaking of WWE, go back 2019. AEW had a small handful of guys that were in WWE. You had Mox, Jericho, you had Pac. I guess you can count Cody, Shawn Spears. Not too many. The rest of the roster were indie guys trying to make a name for themselves on the big platform. Orange Cassidy, who, by the way, is so played out. I am so sick of Orange Cassidy. 2 years with the same, I have been sick of him now for 2 years. Same bullshit. It never changes. You had the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, who were in New Japan, but not really on American TV. You had them. MJF. You had a lot of guys who were fresh. Now, anytime somebody leaves WWE, if they're one of Meltzer's favorites, they get signed to AEW. Ricochet, that's one, got signed right away. Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, and I like these talents. I'm not saying that the talent is bad. It's just the company doesn't really have an identity anymore. It just doesn't. And it's bad when during Full Gear, the AEW diehards weren't even that loud. They weren't even truly that invested. I saw some trying to defend AEW because some always do. I lived through this already with TNA. Some always do. But it was nowhere near as vociferous as it's been in the past. So even some of them are starting to give up. Full Gear was not a good show to me, but it wasn't like a horrible show where I had things to say. In my review, there wasn't much I was even saying because there wasn't anything to say. And I didn't even talk about it on social media because AEW is in a worse place than even TNA was during the Russo years. And that's the fact that at least with TNA, people were talking. With AEW, it's boring. I have apathy. I don't care. They bring in these talents. They don't ever explain who they are. Don't give you a backstory on them. You don't know anything you're just supposed to know. And then instead of actually coming up with storylines, they try to use real world based stuff, which does work sometimes. I'm not saying to not do that, but that's all they've got. How much do you want to bet that when the MJF Adam Cole feud continues, maybe even on Dynamite this week, that MJF brings up Britt Baker? Well, that's why you lost Britt Baker. Like, I'm telling you, I guarantee you it's going to happen. Because MJF has reverted back to being the same exact heel he used to be, taking pot shots that are all based in reality, that makes everybody go, ooh, ah, like CM Punk. The problem is, it's played out. It doesn't work anymore. Even Punk has to add more fiction to his promos, despite having the gift of gab. MJF's only insult is bringing up real life shit, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is he does it all the time and only the hardcore fans get it. But the way AEW's numbers are going down, it's pretty much just all hardcore fans now. That's what it's come down to. They're at their base, I feel. And then every time that the rating goes down, there's always a fucking excuse. Every week, oh, it was basketball. It was the presidential election. There's always some excuse. How about it's bad booking? You know how I know it's bad booking? People don't care. As much as we can sit here and criticize Triple H, and there's lots of things to criticize about his booking, especially this year in comparison to last year, people are still into the characters. You can criticize Cobra Kai for doing stupid shit, and there's tons of it there. People still care about the characters. The problem with AEW is you've got a stable of bad guys doing an invasion angle led by Jon Moxley, and the baby faces defending the company are Daniel Garcia. It's such stupid shit. It's Daniel Garcia, a guy who's never gotten over no matter what they've tried to do with him. It's like Private Party. It's just comedy, bro. The Dark Order, who have been J-Brones since the unfortunate passing of Brody Lee, they are defending AEW. The bottom of the totem pole is defending AEW from the invaders. Why isn't Kenny Omega back yet? He's going to New Japan. Why can't he defend the company? What about Strickland, Swerve? There's a lot of guys that should be defending AEW from Mox's group, but they don't. Everybody's on an island. They don't intermingle with each other. And that makes the product just stale and boring, and it feels like WWE in the mid-2010s. Not the worst thing ever. Still some matches here and there that are good, and a couple of good feuds, but it just feels cold. And the TV, there's no point in watching it anyways. It's not compelling. And until they figure out how to tell compelling stories and create good drama and long-term stories with characters that little by little get over, like what the Bloodline did, if you want to use that as a modern example, they're just going to keep going down because people don't care. Fans don't care about dream matches. Maybe a small number of them do, but it's mostly about how do we get to these dream matches? What's the reason for it being a dream match? Not just a dream match. Not just a match like Roderick Strong versus MJF that nobody wanted to see. That was there just to postpone the Adam Cole MJF match. Why not give MJF the night off? Why even have him at Full Gear if you're going to have him in that match? Like, it's so bewildering and so puzzling, the decisions that AEW makes. The belts aren't over either. What can be done? At this point, I don't even know. But I know I made a video recently where I said that Tony Khan's leadership is never going to improve the company because he has none. So the company's just going to stay where it's at, or maybe hopefully get better when maybe TK listens to other people or just improves, because he is still a rookie, and maybe he'll get better. But it feels like he's getting worse. I don't think he's getting worse. I think during the previous few years, prior to Cody leaving, Cody did a lot of the TV. Helped with it a lot. Now it's just TK and his group. It's not the same. And I don't think it's ever going to change for the better. I admire them for trying new things, like I said before. This NWO thing, not really new for the business, but AEW hasn't really done it like this before. But it's not working. I mean, it's clearly just not working. People are not into it. And it's going to take a while. They're going to have to figure out a way to get these guys over and get the fans to care about them, because the fans just don't care. Full Gear was a very weak show, a weak lineup. There's no development, like I mentioned before. Orange Cassidy, I mean, I've ranted about it in my video. Like, you're in a world title match with a guy who wants to kill you, and you're still doing the pockets gimmick. Like, it's so silly and dumb, man. Like, and can anybody in the company actually, like, talk to this dude and tell him to knock it off? Or do they, and then he tells them to get fucked, and then Tony takes his side? I don't know. There's lots of rumors about this. A lot of rumors that I've heard is that guys are in the company just getting paid and not even arguing with Tony because he won't listen anyways. And they're paying me, and I have a family to feed. I get it. Take your millions. I get it. But AEW is just not going to grow and be stuck with these dwindling audiences in smaller venues, which is a good idea for now, but the idea should be to get into bigger venues later, right? They're moving Australia, the Grand Slam show, from a stadium to a small arena now. What is this, WrestleMania 7? Are they going to lie and say Mox got death threats? Like, what is this? But it just goes to show that they're ice cold right now. They are ice cold. They need something. Not a debut, even though that may help. Not a big, like, talent. Like, they got too many belts. Drop Ring of Honor. I've talked about this before, man. And it's just not going to happen. So why even, honestly, I'm glad I got to vent here on this video, but why even talk about it if nothing is ever going to change? The Emperor has no clothes. Look that up. That will explain how Tony Khan is and how his mentality is when it comes to AEW.